Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Head of Physical Performance at Kubota Spears, Ollie Richardson. This episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is sponsored by simplyfaster.com, and that's spelled S-I-M-P-L-I faster.com. So alongside the free lap timing systems, simplyfaster.com currently holds the eccentric K-Box. So if you haven't heard of the K-Box, it's a new product that uses flywheel technology to allow higher velocity eccentric overload. So I saw the K-Box for the first time when Mike Young from the US brought a couple over for one of his workshops in Gloucester. So off the back of that, I was really keen to use one, and I actually got my hands on one and was able to spend a couple of hours playing around with lots of different exercises and getting used to the K-Box. So from personal experience, getting out of the bottom of the squat, powering up and having the K-Box pull you through the floor on the way down is absolutely incredible. So basically, the harder you go on the concentric portion of the lift, the more it's going to give you on the eccentric. So if you're going to go for it, you're going to get pulled through the floor. At simplyfaster.com, there's also a great blog from Frederick, who is one of the co-owners of Eccentric, so you can learn more about the K-Box there. So if you are interested in getting a K-Box, get to simplyfaster.com, so that's S-I-M-P-L-I faster.com, and get a K-Box for yourself. So this episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is also sponsored by Vald Performance, creators of the Nordboard. So if you haven't heard of the Nordboard already, don't worry, I'll explain. It's really simple. The Nordboard is a really fast and accurate system for monitoring hamstring strength. So as practitioners, we can do very little about athlete age and previous hamstring injury, but what we can do something about is our athlete's eccentric strength, and that's where the Nordboard fits in really nicely. It isn't going to get your athlete's hamstrings bulletproof, but what it is going to do is give you the right information so you can make the right decisions at the right time. So the Nordboard isn't available until December 2015, but if you do want any more information, you can go over to Vald Performance, that's V-A-L-D performance.com, or email info@valdperformance.com. So today we've got Ollie Richardson on the phone. So there's been a little bit of a demand for someone who's involved in mixed martial arts. So I wanted to combine that with someone who was involved in performance sport as well. So we've got Ollie on, and he is the head of physical performance at Kubota Spears in Japan, as I said in the intro. But he also has a very keen interest and knowledge into mixed martial arts. So it's a really interesting chat with Ollie because we discuss all things mixed martial arts and how that kind of combines with his role in rugby, and how he's brought the skills learned from his time with mixed martial artists and brought that into the rugby setting. So that's really interesting. So we look at conditioning for a fighter. We look at translating training techniques from mixed martial arts to other sports, as I mentioned. We look at strength training for a fighter, and we discuss culture, which is a really interesting segment of the podcast. Really interesting to me, just how it differs between the two sports. So I'll keep this intro nice and short, but I do want to bring to your attention the webinar series. So we've got number 2 coming up, which is really exciting, and it's going to be with Ian McKeown from Port Adelaide, and he's the head of athletic development. So he came on the podcast quite a few episodes ago, and it was really interesting. So I've been keeping in touch with Ian, and he's decided to go ahead with doing the number 2 webinar. So if you are interested, go to paceyperformance.co.uk/Ian, and you can find out more information on what Ian's going to deliver on the webinar, and you can register and go through the process there. Really excited, because I spoke to Ian at length on what he's going to deliver, and it looks really cool. So apologies for my croaky throat. It's 5:30 in the morning, got a bit of travelling to do, so I had to get this intro in early. But I will leave you with Ollie Richardson. Hope you enjoy the episode. Let me know what you think, and now I'll speak to you soon. Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today I've got Ollie Richardson, who is the head of performance at Kubota Spears in Tokyo. So welcome to the podcast, Ollie.
Hey, thanks Rob, thanks for having me on. Probably just first off want to say, thanks for having me on, and it's a real privilege to be on here. I've been following your podcast, and the caliber of people you've managed to get on here and share their knowledge with the listeners is commendable on your part and exciting for all of us in this field.
Cool, thank you very much, appreciate that. So do you want to give us a little bit of background on yourself, your education, and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, okay, so maybe I'll start from where we're at now. So as you introed me, so I'm currently heading up the performance department for Kubota Spears in Tokyo. For guys who don't know much about rugby in Japan, the setup over here is called the Top League, and the constituents of that Top League are big corporations and companies in Japan. So there's quite a few companies that have rugby teams as their kind of showpiece for the company. And Kubota is one of those, and we compete against people like Panasonic, Toshiba, Coca-Cola, and people like that. So it's quite a big deal for the companies, and it's a nice showpiece for them, and it's a very healthy competition because they recruit worldwide, and that they bring in some really high caliber players to play alongside their company employees who make up the rest of the team. So that's where I'm at the minute. I've been here since April, and I'm really enjoying my time so far in Tokyo and Japan as a whole. Previous to that, so I was heading up Queensland Reds performance department for 2 seasons over in Brisbane, which is an amazing place, amazing club, amazing place, and again a really interesting and really good experience for me. Before I was heading up the department, I worked for 2 seasons before that at the same club, so at the Reds as the rehab and kind of reintegration manager for their senior team. I managed to get that role. It's kind of two stages. Damien Marsh, who was the head of performance, and Ewan McKenzie, who was the head coach at the time at the Reds, they were looking to recruit, and I'd worked with Dean Benton, who'd also worked with Damien, and via that connection, we got put together. We had a few Skype chats and a formal interview, and then they recruited me and brought me over to do that job for them.
So what happened before that?
So basically, that's what I've been doing for the last kind of 4 or 5 years. Before that, I was at Leicester Tigers in the UK doing a similar sort of job, obviously a junior role. I started out at Tigers on an internship in 2004, 2005, and basically just committed to their program and just worked as hard as I could. And through, I guess, partly my endeavour and a bit of luck along the way, people moved on from that performance department, and I managed to kind of slowly work my way up at that club. I mean, Leicester was. It's an amazing place. It's an amazing team. I mean, they've been there or thereabouts in rugby in the European scene for years, and their drive, ambition, and consistency is quite an incredible thing to be part of. It really moulded me going forward about what I believed it took to win at things. So it was a really good, solid grounding for me. Again, I was pretty lucky during my time at Leicester. we'd had a discussion as a performance department that we wanted to look at wrestling and some kind of combat sports to see what we could integrate into the training for the rugby team. And I kind of took it upon myself, the best way to work out what's going to work and what's not going to work is to get involved in a sport, a combat sport. So around 2006, 2007, I went and just started training with Leicester Shoot Fighters. So it's an MMA gym run by Nathan Leverton in Leicester, which is, a pretty renowned mixed martial arts gym. And I specifically went there just to learn some skills, understand wrestling, understand body manipulation, and understand how I could try and transfer that across to the guys at Tigers. And that kind of organically presented me with a couple of opportunities. So while I was training, I met two professional fighters, Jim Warhead and Andre Winner. We started chatting. I started training with them. I started looking at what they were doing training-wise, and then eventually we started working together. And then I met Dan Hardy, Dean Amersinger, and basically from then I kind of helped them from an S&C point of view and also a program management point of view. And that's kind of how I got an avenue into mixed martial arts and preparing athletes for MMA.
So is that still continuing now through your alongside your current role?
No, it's not my current role in Japan. No, so I still speak to a lot of those guys. I'm very close to Dean and Dan, and we talk a lot about where the sport's going and about physical preparation for it. And Dean Amersinger is running a gym down in Windsor. And a lot of the principles that we talk about, he's right on the coalface, implementing them, and kind of continuing our work through.
So, what were the main differences across the kind of cultures of where you were working kind of full time in your rugby setting to down at the gym with the MMA guys?
It was quite stark, to be fair. So I still think both sports can learn a lot from each other, although the things that MMA can learn from rugby and the professional setup of rugby, I do think are developing within that sport already. So back in 2006-07, when I first met that fight group, their training was basically in disarray. They trained harder than I'd ever seen anyone train, but it was kind of all over the place. So one of the big things I brought to them was just some structure in their training, just their training week, the intensity of their sessions, the volume of their sessions, and how to bring some consistency to their training, and actually have a day off once in a while and actually let themselves recover, which they weren't great at. And that the mentality of those combat guys is that if they're resting and their opponents are not resting, then their opponents are at an advantage at that stage. And like I said, I think things are changing. Sports science and strength and conditioning program management, it's pretty evident that they have been integrated into MMA, and MMA training is changing quite rapidly, I think. You only have to look. You only ever get snippets of behind the scenes type programs, but watching Conor McGregor and his build up into the Chad Mendes fight, there's clearly a lot of structure. There's clearly some very, very smart people behind what he's doing, and that's what made me think that things have caught up now, and there seems to be a lot more structure in the sport of MMA.
So there's always been a big kind of popularity rise in MMA over the last couple of years. So why do you think that is? Why have people in kind of more traditional sports looking at that as the kind of almost like the pinnacle of physical preparation?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think the competition of MMA, especially at the pointy end, nothing can really come that close to MMA. It's the pinnacle of what competition is. There's two people. There's no one else in there. Everything is on the line. Everybody is watching. If you've missed a half step or you took a shortcut, you're gonna get found out. There isn't 14 other people that can pick up the slack for you. You are literally in the spotlight. I think that appeals to a lot of people, and they see that and they understand that it's the ultimate gladiatorial sport. Now, whether what goes into making that performance happen is something we should aspire to or not, it is a bit different. Like I said, I think things are getting a lot better, but in more established sports, like for instance the AFL or Super Rugby or Premiership Rugby, the structures, the processes of training, they're very high end. That is something that people should also be looking at and thinking, well, that is producing results week in, week out in a competition that has been around for a long time, and it is very, very competitive in nature.
So when you went into these guys, this fight group, and you're kind of training with them to get an insight into what they were doing, what did the training look like?
Well, most people, I guess, now would know the constituents of MMA, but in those earlier days when I started getting involved, it wasn't necessarily governed by a head coach. So there was a striking coach who did his bit. There was a grappling coach who did his bit. I was doing my S&C bit, and then there's a wrestling coach doing his bit, and and how that was all tailored and streamlined probably wasn't so good in the earlier days. In contrast, in the professional rugby teams, every session is done in relation to another session. It's all coming under one kind of periodized plan that is looking to get the team to a certain point in a certain amount of time. So it was kind of, they like I said before, they train very hard. I just felt it just needed a little bit more guidance in terms of balancing their week and trying to get the best out of each of those sessions, rather than every session at 100 miles an hour and lacking a little bit of quality and lacking a bit of contrast in the days and the weeks and the months and then the camp cycles.
So you just want to talk to us a little bit about your kind of role and how you made that happen, and how you were, as a practitioner, kind of add into what they were currently doing?
With the MMA group?
With the MMA guys, yeah.
So look, it was difficult coming in as an outsider who wasn't in the sport, but I also think that was a good thing too. So it was a bit of a double-sided coin, because people don't necessarily like change as a general rule, and without being too broad, in general, fight or combat coaches like the way they did stuff. This is the way we do stuff in this sport. This is the way we're going to do it. So I kind of guess when I went into that sport, I was reasonably reasonably confident I could make a difference, and if just given time, the coaches and the fight group would see and understand that. But by changing a few things around and actually resting once in a while, and training at a very, very high intensity but keeping the volume low, or training at a high volume and keeping the intensity low, working on that inverse relationship between the two things. But I also was very conscious that I didn't want to step on any toes, upset the technical coaches who, are very important people in a fighter's life. So realistically, most of the input I had on that fight group initially was taking the kind of structures and processes that we used at Tigers and just modifying them slightly and bringing them into the MMA world. After a short transitional time, the fighters and the coaches that they came on board. They understood. We talked regularly, and it was a learning process for me as well. Like, I didn't jump into MMA and have all the answers, but what I did have was some examples of how we do it from a professional sport and a professional setup, and we just amalgamated the two things, two ideas. It was very much a to and fro learning experience for all of us, and you know, we did some really good things. We did some we progressed that kind of program, and still now, so those guys still use some of the concepts we were using back then.
Sounds good. So when it comes to a conditioning point of view for the guys that you were working with at that time, what does that look like? What does the conditioning side of things look like?
So for me, across all sports, and you know, the longer I'm in this game, probably the less black and white I become. But in general, I think strength training is a general construct, but I believe work capacity and conditioning is very, very, very specific. So a lot of what we did in my mind, and I'm a kind of concepts. I like a concept, so the content of those concepts may change over time, but the concept is probably still the same. And what we used to talk about is that we need to condition at or above fight intensity. So by the time that you come to fight night, the only thing you have to worry about is managing your adrenaline and managing getting punched and kicked in the face and following your game plan. So in terms of how hard it's going to be, and how taxing it's going to be on a system, we will have dealt with that already consistently over however long we've been together. So all you need to worry about are these things on fight night. And I think, and the feedback from the fight group is they liked that concept. They understood that concept. It was something they felt they could apply to fight night. Something it gave them confidence walking in there. And yeah, I mean, it's very difficult without metrics as such to judge. You know, before we started this concept, we were this fit, and when we finished this concept, we were this fit. Because that's just not MMA, and that's just not practical. But subjectively, a lot of fighters really liked the idea, and B always felt that come fight night, they were happy to go 3 5-minute rounds as fast as they can, or 5 5-minute rounds in championship fights, if that's what it took.
So when you talk about specificity and that term used in conjunction with conditioning, when it comes to training through the week or through the months, how specific are you getting with your conditioning, or is it move from kind of general to specific like you would do in other sports?
Yeah, exactly. Moving from general to specific, the only not frustration, but the only thing at that time you kind of had to deal with is that you just seemed to bounce from camp to camp to camp. So there wasn't much time for a nice general prep block where you could just take them away from their sport, develop some central qualities, and then integrate that back in. So in theory, it was nice to go from general to specific, but very rarely did we have a legitimate block where we could do some general conditioning and try and make a change that way. And as most combat sports participants, once you'd finished a camp, once you'd fought, there was a kind of block where no one really knew where anyone was, and that was an enforced off season. And by the time that was done, it was almost time for camp again. So when we did have time, we did do some general stuff. We did, we did some much less specific stuff. But most of the time, we tended to bounce from camp to camp to camp. I mean, again, that seems to be changing, and I think George St. Pierre was probably at the forefront of that. You know, he's talked in the media quite a lot about how it's camps are camps, but once camp's finished, he's always training. So it's his lifestyle now, and I'm not involved as closely with the sport anymore. But from what I see and people I talk to, that seems to be more of the norm now. Is that it's a 50-week-a-year job, and you might have a holiday for a couple of a couple of weeks here and there. But when you're outside of camp, and I completely agree, is that then's a time where you can actually develop some qualities, technical or tactical or physical qualities. You can develop those qualities without having to worry about constantly drilling for a game plan, constantly trying to improve for this one point in time.
So on the flip side of that, what have you taken away from MMA that now influences your practice in rugby, or at the time did influence your practice in rugby?
So, as a lot of things seem to be, it was a bit cyclical. So when I first got in, I was I can use this, I can use that, I can use that. But after I had time to kind of incubate some of the ideas and speak to people and try some stuff, I've kind of gone almost, not quite, but almost a full circle. So the main difference I find, so the wrestling and the grappling components of MMA, there's a lot of setting stuff up. There's a lot of tricking people into things, and obviously there's a lot of physical manipulation in that. But I feel like it's done over a time span that is almost not applicable to rugby. So the positions that you could get into in rugby where wrestling or grappling would be of benefit, they're over in it. If you're still doing it in 2 seconds, it's gone. It's too late. You've got the 1 or 2 seconds to clean a ruck, or you've got 1 or 2 seconds to manipulate someone out of position, and then it's over. So there's no setup. There's no fakes. There's no trapping people into things. It's a very, very explosive, very, very short physical endeavor. There's a couple of people who've kind of took this on. We're working with a guy called Brett O'Farrell, who runs Tackle Tech. So he used to play for Melbourne Storm, and he's also a black belt in BJJ. And he's really carved out this niche for himself, where he's obviously high level experience in both sports, but he's amalgamated the two and just got rid of stuff that isn't applicable. So he consults to us at Kubota, and he comes over 2 or 3 times a year, and he's basically done what I was kind of thinking. He's took away all that stuff that you're just not going to have time to do, and he's refined it down to three or four skills, and then 5 or 6 specific strengthening kind of on-field drills that he uses for the tackle area and the breakdown area and general physical manipulation.
So where in the program does this fit? So in a week at your place in Tokyo, so you're leading up to a game on Saturday, where does this fit into your program? Yeah,
okay, so we have and this year especially, we don't start the proper top league for another month, and we've been in training since April. So we've had an incredible prep period, and during that time we've used it as and when we feel we need to. So Brett's come in and he's done some stuff. We've kept those drills when he's gone back to Australia, and we've repped that through each week, twice a week, normally on a Tuesday and Thursday. And then when he comes back, he continues with his work with them, and we repeat the process. Now we're getting a bit closer to the season, because we've had so much time. Excuse me. Because we've had so much time with them, that'll be reduced to a Tuesday only. So on a Monday we have a quite light recovery day. On a Tuesday, we have our heaviest day, which always includes a block of contact. So some live contact and some drills that are full contact and are based around that tackle area and the tackle skills that we've been working on for such a long amount of time.
So you mentioned right at the start that the Kubota guys are actually employees of the company. How does that work around with the schedule?
Yeah, right. So we have 10 or 11 full-time pros. So they have a slightly different schedule, but the rest of the team, they have a requirement to the company. So on a Monday morning, all day Wednesday, and either a Thursday morning or a Thursday afternoon, depending the opposite that we want to train. They have to go and do whatever their job is. So some guys will be in the Kubota warehouse, some guys will be in the head office doing an office job and what have you. So yeah, it's difficult for them, but it's definitely manageable. It's definitely manageable. We get everything we want to do done. We just have to be a little bit smart about where we put it in the program, and obviously be conscious of their requirements. So some guys are having to travel to and from Tokyo to Kubota, which is 45 minutes. Some guys are in the warehouse working, but what one thing I'll say is the guys that I work, they are incredibly diligent with their physical maintenance. So we have a physical maintenance or physical preparation period during the day, which is something I did at the Reds and something I've brought in here, where I really want to put it back on the athletes. I really want them to not be dependent on the coaching staff and the physio staff for their physical preparation. So they have 45 minutes. If we have some general tests, some knee to wall, some sit and reach, some hip flexor tests. If they are outside of what is their normal range, well, it's on them to do something about it before they come to the physios or before they come to the staff. If they can't do something about it, then of course we need to be in the loop, and of course we need to know about it, and we can make decisions about whether they train, whether a modified training, or whether we think we can push them through and it's full training. But the emphasis is on them. They have to be responsible for their own status and where they're at. It's a bugbear of mine. Is coach dependency. Is just walking in the morning, pointing at hip flexion, expecting the physio to do something about it.
So they will know that the test, they will know their norms, and they just get on with it. If anything needs to be flagged up, they tell you then.
And obviously staff are around.
Yeah.
And we have fixed protocols for mobilisation, stabilisation, and what have you. But I'm not going to stand in there and holding 52 people's hands just to make sure they're all right, because they're a little bit tight because they've been sat on the train for 45 minutes. They're adults, and this is an adult environment, and athletes need to take responsibility for themselves.
So just moving on a little bit, I had Rick Moylan on, who was Ricky Hatton's coach a couple of years ago, and he spoke about the kind of culture when it comes to strength training with fighters. What's your experience of integrating kind of a more comprehensive strength program with the guys and mixed martial artists?
Yeah, so with the Roughhouse group, which was the pro MMA team, it was a little bit of a hard sell. But I do believe it is a fundamental across all sports. So we know that increasing max strength has an impact on all the other physical qualities, all the way down to endurance. So to not address that in a program has to limit that athlete at some stage. And I think that crosses all sports, and obviously depending on the sport, depends on how much time you dedicate to each of the physical qualities. But we know, and even recently, Twitter seems to have become my looking glass over the industry of S&C. There's some amazing information and a plethora of opinion, but also now research papers and review papers and reviews of conferences that is accessible to everyone now. And over the last couple of months, we still keep coming back to there has to be a max strength thread to your programming, and it's something that even, back when I started out, people were saying it back then, and people are still saying it now. And although it was a difficult sell to start with, I think once they kind of committed to increasing their max strength, also, and all the things that go along with that, they felt the benefit, and then it wasn't such a hard sell. It was still sometimes a hard sell to the coaches, because they were a generation before who everyone will always always say, oh, strength training makes you slow and what have you, even though obviously we know that not to be true. So it's a little bit harder to sell to those guys, but same as everything. If someone feels a benefit to it, then they're gonna commit to it, and they're gonna enjoy that as part of their program.
I know there's plenty of guys out there who are going through this hard sell. So how did you approach it, and what were the kind of things that you implemented first to get that kind of immediate buy-in?
I think I had a bit of a sneaky advantage in that they were coming into the Leicester Tigers gym for a time, so they could see how professional it was. They understood that we have this whole department dedicated to strength and conditioning, and our philosophy for this club is whatever it was, but it included strength training, and they saw that they put two and two together and like, well, these guys must know what they're talking about. People are paying them to do this job, so I guess we'll listen. And probably one of the biggest things I think we had to get over is that getting stronger would automatically mean you're going to be bigger, and then you're not going to make weight, and then that's going to be a disaster. I don't want to do any weights. I don't want to get any bigger because I'm already cutting 4.5 kilos to try and make this weight class as it is. So initially I talked to them about, of course, if you were a strength power athlete, you have to address cross-sectional area and you have to address the neural characteristics of strength training. But, if you're going to address cross-sectional area, then obviously you're going to get bigger. That's the nature of it, and you're going to get heavier. So I don't think it's quite as black and white as this, but I just sold neural adaptations to them. Okay, so we're gonna lift pretty heavy. We're not going to do a lot of it because we're going to work down this side of the equation, and we're going to leave development of cross-sectional area alone. So you're not going to put on too much weight. You're not going to miss your weight class, and everything's going to be fine. And these guys aren't stupid. They can rationalize things and they can work out whether that's something they want to commit to, and they committed to it, and the feedback was great. Obviously it didn't happen overnight. It took a year before you really saw these guys had developed, their strength had developed, and they were feeling that transfer to their wrestling, especially because of the time constraints of wrestling. You get a bit more time to apply force in wrestling than compared to striking, but they could really start feeling that difference. And like what it's like. As soon as an athlete feels a difference, that's it. You've got them.
So how did you approach that with the coaches? You said it was a bit harder with the coaches. Was it down the same line?
Yeah, down the same line, and because at the time the training was a little bit disjointed. It wasn't all under the same roof. There wasn't a head coach. Realistically, to a point, we just cracked on and got on with it. And one of the things I said to coaches, look, I don't want to substitute anything for strength training. I'm not saying, okay, now, no, we're not doing any Muay Thai. We're just doing strength training. I'm not trying to do that. This is just to supplement your technical and tactical work. So don't think I'm trying to steal time off you. All I want to do is just start them on this path, and over time, you'll see the benefits of it.
So I just want to take a little kind of step to the right and just talk a little bit about fight preparation. How did you go about prepping your athletes in them kind of final stages before their kind of big night? This crosses the spectrum of what we have to do in this profession, but I believe strength and conditioning is relationship based. You can be the smartest guy, you can have the best protocols, you can be in the best shape you want to be, but if you can't maintain a relationship with the guys you're training, it's almost a complete waste of your knowledge, experience, and work ethic or what have you. So during fight camps, we just try to have an open dialogue, just all the time, just have an open dialogue. And one of the things we always talked about, and something that I try to live by myself, is just having what
what are our beliefs? What are we saying and what are we doing? They just have to be aligned at all times. We can't have this dissonance of saying one thing, but when no one's watching, we're doing something else. And if all those things are in line in sport and I think in life, then you're probably going to be as prepared as you can be. And especially in mixed martial arts, the differences between winning and losing are so incredibly small. Sometimes you're going to be really well prepared and you're going to lose, and that's just the nature of the level that the sport is at and the tiny differences between winning and losing. But if we're consistently aligned and we consistently commit to what we believe and what we say, then we're gonna be in as good a position as we can be in. And sometimes things don't work out the way you want them to work out, and sometimes they do, and you do amazing things.
So when you talk about kind of building relationships and actually having a personality, do you think that's something that kind of gets lost in maybe if like interns? It's all about kind of the knowledge side of things, but the other side that we've been talking about there kind of gets lost.
Yeah, I mean it's hard. It's hard for interns. It's you're caught in a catch-22 situation. So you have to build relationships. As soon as you build relationships, coaching staff think you're too close to players. So you just get caught in this. And this happens to me all the time. And my transition at the Reds from rehab coach to head of performance was really difficult. So rehab coach, I was spending 8 days a week, 26 hours a day with individuals because and you can't do that and not form a relationship, and then suddenly I'm head of performance where the head coach wants X, Y, and Z, and 9 times out of 10 it is not technical that they want. They want someone to be a hard ass on the players, which is a debatable concept at the best of times. So you have to. We know you have to have relationships, otherwise people aren't going to buy into what you want to do. But somehow, and I don't have an answer, and somehow you need to also maintain enough distance where certainly the perception is that you have distance, and also in reality is that if you have to, you're still a coach and they're still a player.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, but like I say, for interns, it's a minefield. It's really tricky. I don't necessarily have an answer. But I think one thing maybe is being probably working on themselves. So the more confident they are in themselves, the more confident they are in social situations and in the knowledge that they have, they're probably going to form better relationships just because people can read insecurities in other people. So and rugby players are the best at it. Like it's like shark smelling blood. So yeah. if they're happy with themselves, they're confident with who they are and their knowledge and what have you. That's going to come across, and people are going to respond to that, and they're going to understand that without them having to tell everyone. Like I remember, I just wanted everyone to know I knew what I was going on about, and that's I don't think that's the way. Just looking inward a little bit, I think will probably pay a little bit more for them.
Definitely, no, 100%. So just to, I don't want to take too much of your time up. Just to finish off, where can people keep up to date with what you've got going on personally?
So my Twitter handle is Fighter Strength, which I'm on and off. My email address is physicalperformance@icloud.com. On Facebook, Ollie Richardson and what have you. There's not on Facebook. There's not much S&C stuff on there, but that's probably just my personal site really. But yeah, that's about it. There's no blog or website going at the minute. The 3 kids in a full-time job seeing to that.
So are you pretty active on Twitter? Or a bit of a
yeah, a little bit. So what I've recently started doing is just retweeting a lot of job opportunities because there seems to be especially the last 6 months a lot of opportunities cropping up, and the more people that get to see that, the better really, because I remember how hard it is and I feel very lucky about getting an internship at Leicester in the first place, because that was obviously that was a catalyst for everything. I'd done a lot of work outside of that, trying to get myself into the best position, so if that opportunity came, I could take it and make the most of it. But I still feel pretty blessed and lucky that I got that opportunity in 2004, and that set me on the trajectory that I've been on now.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I'll let you go because I'm sure there's something to do with 3 kids and the job. So I just want to thank you for your time again. Really appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me on, mate. That was I enjoyed that.
Absolute pleasure, mate. And I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Rob.
All right, pal.
See you, mate.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 57 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the chat with Ollie. Just a different perspective was great, and someone involved in mixed martial arts, which we haven't had on the podcast before. So massive thanks to Ollie, and massive thanks to today's sponsors, Val Performance and Simply Faster. So as I mentioned in the intro, if you are interested in listening to the Pacey Performance webinar series number 2 with Ian McKeel, you can go to paceyperformance.co.uk/Ian. He's going to discuss key areas of development, so foundational movements, his running model, strength and power development, and transfer to performance. He's going to discuss coaching and programming. So it's going to be a really exciting hour with Ian, plus time for questions at the end. So I assure you there'll be more time for questions at the end than there were in the Dan Baker webinar. So really excited to bring you that. Thanks for listening to episode 57 with Ollie. Again, would love your feedback, and I'll speak to you soon.